Hey, how's it going? It's Nancy Gamon. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I love to experiment with ice dyeing fabrics, and I prefer to use Procion fiber reactive dye for my projects. I did an earlier video called Rit versus Procion that you might like to check out. It compares the results of these two brands. But some viewers have asked, well, what about using them together? Can I put Rit and Procion on the same project? Well, today we're going to find out what happens when we do just that. I'm going to dye 3 pieces of fabric, one with just Rit, one with just Procion, and the third using Rit and Procion together so we can compare the results. I have folded each of the 3 pieces of fabric in an identical way, and the first thing I'm going to do is cover them all with the same number of ice cubes. I'm going to use 2 different colors of dye so that we can see what's going on. So I'll start by putting 1 teaspoon of Rit powdered dye in the color purple on this project. Next, I'll put 1 teaspoon of Procion fiber reactive dye in the color moss green on this fabric. Then for the center project, I'll put a 1/2 teaspoon of Rit in purple and a 1/2 teaspoon of the Procion in moss green. Now the projects are ready to rest overnight for the ice to melt, the powder to turn to liquid, and the colors to seep into the fabric. I'll get back together with you again in 22 to 24 hours to check out the results. All right, let's take a look at what we have here. We'll start out with the Rit and the purple dye. Looks like a nice vibrant purple. Got a lot of white space on this one and some pretty pink halos around the deep purple. Now here's the Procion in the green. It does look very mossy. Got a pretty pattern here in the center and some nice variations to the color around the edges. And here we have the Procion and the Rit together. Rit in purple, Procion in green. One thing I'm noticing is that it seems like it takes a lot more Rit dye to get a strong color, even though I used equal amounts. It seems like the Procion in the green is a lot more prevalent in the finished design. So Rit and Procion have different finishing techniques for the rinsing and washing and setting. So if you'd like to learn more about that, take a look at that earlier video I made called Rit versus Procion. I go into details there. For the purposes of this experiment, I'm going to use the Procion finishing method just because it seems a little more comprehensive, and that'll have every fabric finished in the same way. So I'm going to take care of that behind the scenes, and then we'll take a look at the fabrics dry so we can have a better idea of what's going on here. Here are the pieces of fabric, washed, dried, and pressed with a very hot iron. When I've tried using Rit in the past, the color has bled all over the place, but this time, using the processes that I typically use with the Procion dye, using those products and chemicals, the white stayed white. We did lose the vibrant pink, but other than that, the purple stayed a pretty nice grapey color. The piece that was dyed with Procion, even though it was only sprinkled with one color, the moss green, as is typical for Procion dyes, we got all kinds of colors, so the dye broke out into its components. There's some light blue, kind of a brown, a little peach action going on, so interesting results and designs with the Procion dye. On the piece where Rit and Procion are mixed together, they both seemed to hold true to their own selves. The Rit stayed its grapey color, the Procion moss broke out as usual into its components, so there's green, brown, blue going on. So I would say the answer to the question of whether you could use Rit and Procion together on the same project was yes. However, you might want to double up on the quantity of the Rit dye and maybe toss in a couple extra ice cubes to help it permeate the fabric. Also, in my mind, Rit is more of a home quality dye product, where Procion is a little bit more of a professional grade quality. So over time, there may be differences in how the color lasts or fades. If you'd like to experiment together, I'd love to see you at one of my virtual workshops. Sign yourself up for my email newsletter list. There's a registration link in the video description. This is the best way to get first chance at workshop registration and score discounts. I hope to be creating with you soon. Do 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 do.